You won't believe what just unfolded in the Senate today. It was supposed to be just another hearing, a routine clash of ideas in a chamber filled with lawmakers, policy wonks, and cameras capturing every word for the world to see. The topic? Public education reform, a subject guaranteed to spark fierce debate. With both sides digging in over how to fix a system that's been failing too many American kids for far too long. The room buzzed with anticipation as senators took their seats, staffers shuffled papers, and the C-SPAN feed hummed along, broadcasting the proceedings to anyone who cared to tune in. Everyone expected tough questions, sharp exchanges, and maybe a few viral soundbites to light up social media. But absolutely no one could have predicted the bombshell that was about to drop. A moment so raw and personal, it would leave the entire chamber stunned and the internet in a frenzy. Senator Elizabeth Warren, the Massachusetts firebrand, known for her razor-sharp intellect and no-holds-barred style, stepped up to the microphone with a glint in her eye that signaled she was ready for battle. Her reputation precedes her. A former Harvard professor with a knack for dismantling opponents with surgical precision, Warren has never been one to shy away from a fight. She launched into a blistering critique of the Republican approach to education reform, her voice dripping with conviction as she tore into their proposals, calling them short-sighted, underfunded, and out of touch with the needs of students, teachers, and parents across the country. Her words were like a well-aimed dart, hitting their mark with force and drawing nods from her allies in the room. The atmosphere was charged. The kind of electric tension you feel when a debate is about to hit its peak. Senators leaned forward in their seats, some scribbling notes, others exchanging glances, while the audience both in the chamber and watching from home braced for the next salvo. But then, in a move that caught everyone off guard, Warren pivoted from policy to something far more personal. With a smirk curling at the corner of her mouth and a tone laced with biting sarcasm, she turned her gaze directly to Senator John Kennedy, the Louisiana lawmaker with the slow Southern drawl and folksy charm that makes him seem more like your favorite uncle than a Washington insider. "Frankly," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a knife, "it's hard to take advice on education from a relic of the past. Like you, someone who seems more at home in the last century than in today's world." The words landed like a thunderclap. For a moment, the chamber was so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. A few of Warren's supporters let out nervous chuckles, but most of the room froze, as if the air itself had turned to ice. Senators shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Staffers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Even the stenographer seemed to pause, her fingers hovering over the keys. This wasn't just a policy jab, it was a deeply personal attack. One that didn't just question Kennedy's stance but mocked his very identity. His Southern roots, his unpolished style, the way he carries himself in a city that often prizes polish over substance. In the cutthroat world of politics, where insults are par for the course, this still felt like a step too far, a blow below the belt that left everyone wondering how the target would respond. All eyes turned to John Kennedy, who sat motionless in his chair, his face a mask of calm. The camera zoomed in, capturing every detail, the slight tilt of his head, the steady gaze in his eyes, the absence of any visible anger or distress. It was a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the kind of pause that makes your heart pound because you know something big is coming. Would he fire back with fury, ignore the slight, and move on? Or would he lean into that Southern wit he's known for, the kind that disarms opponents with a smile and a quip? The tension was almost unbearable, a living thing that pulsed through the room, making it feel as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. You could sense the unspoken question on everyone's mind. What's he going to do? Whispers rippled through the gallery, soft murmurs of speculation as senators and aides leaned toward one another, their eyes never leaving Kennedy. The man from Louisiana, often underestimated because of his unhurried speech and down-home metaphors, was now the center of attention, the fulcrum on which this entire moment balanced. He didn't flinch, didn't fidget, didn't give any hint of being rattled. Instead, he reached for his microphone with a deliberate slowness, adjusted it with the care of a man who knows exactly what he's about to do, and took a single, measured breath. The room seemed to lean in closer, every ear straining to catch his first words. What happened next wasn't just a response, it was a moment that would reverberate far beyond the Senate chamber, a display of poise, intelligence, and unshakable dignity that no one in that room could have seen coming. This was John Kennedy, the man so often dismissed as a simple country lawyer, preparing to turn Elizabeth Warren's cutting insult into an opportunity not just to defend himself, but to speak for every person who's ever been judged for how they talk, where they're from, or how they present themselves to the world. His voice, when it finally came, was steady. Not loud, but carrying a weight that filled the room, commanding attention without demanding it. This wasn't the opening of an angry tirade or a petty counterattack. It was the start of something far greater, a lesson in how to rise above a cheap shot with grace and strength. The Senate, for that brief moment, was no longer just a place for political posturing. It became a stage where character and intellect were put to the ultimate test. And John Kennedy was about to show the world what he was made of. Stay tuned. Because what he said next didn't just silence the room, it set the internet on fire, transforming a moment of personal attack into a cultural touchstone that would be talked about, shared, and celebrated for days to come. To understand the brilliance of what happened in that Senate chamber, you need to know the man behind the microphone. Because John Kennedy is not what most people expect. With his slow Southern drawl, folksy sayings, and unassuming demeanor, he's often mistaken for someone you'd meet swapping stories over coffee on a Louisiana porch. Not a heavyweight sparring with Washington's sharpest minds. That's where people get it wrong. Senator John Kennedy is no ordinary politician. And Elizabeth Warren's biting jab calling him a relic of the past gave him the perfect stage to prove it. Born in Centerville, Mississippi, and raised in Zachary, Louisiana, Kennedy's roots run deep in the South, where small-town values and plain talk shape the way people connect. But don't let the accent fool you. His academic credentials could make an Ivy League professor blush. He graduated with honors from Vanderbilt University, one of the South's most prestigious schools, before earning a Juris Doctor from the University of Virginia Law School, where he honed his legal mind among the best. Then, in a move that sets him apart from most of his Senate colleagues, he crossed the Atlantic to study at Oxford University in England, one of the world's most revered institutions. There, he worked under Sir Rupert Cross, a legal scholar whose name carries weight in academic circles across the globe. This isn't the resume of a man stuck in the last century, as Warren implied. It's the kind of pedigree that screams intellectual firepower, earned through years of hard work and discipline. Yet what makes Kennedy truly unique isn't just his degrees, it's how he carries them. He could flaunt his credentials, adopt the polished jargon of Washington elites, or pepper his speech with academic buzzwords to prove his smarts. Instead, he chooses to speak in the language of the people he serves, with a clarity and warmth that resonate far beyond the Beltway. His sayings, like, "If you support defunding the police, you've tested positive for stupid," or "You can't fix stupid, but you can vote it out," have gone viral not because they're flashy, but because they cut through the noise with truth and humor. That's why Warren's attack didn't just miss the mark, it handed Kennedy a golden opportunity to remind everyone that intelligence isn't about how you sound, it's about what you stand for. And when he finally responded, it wasn't just a comeback, it was a surgical dismantling of her insult, delivered with a composure that left the room in awe. As the Senate chamber hung in the silence following Warren's cutting remark, every eye was on Kennedy. The cameras zoomed in, the tension so thick you could feel it through the screen. Would he take the bait and fire back with anger? Would he let the insult slide, risking looking weak? Or would he do something else entirely? Kennedy leaned forward, adjusted his microphone with that deliberate calm that had already become his trademark in the moment. and spoke in a voice that was steady, unhurried, and laced with the kind of quiet confidence that commands a room. "Ma'am," he began, his southern accent rolling out like a warm breeze. "I may talk like I'm from the country, but I didn't go to Oxford just to visit. I studied there, under scholars who'd make most folks' heads spin, and I earned every degree I've got. Not a one came with my morning coffee." The room shifted. A few senators stifled smiles. Others nodded slowly. And even some of Warren's allies seemed to shrink in their seats. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle, then continued. "If you're done trying to win debates with cheap shots, maybe we can get back to the real work here, making sure every child in America gets a fair shot at a good education." The air in the chamber changed instantly. It wasn't just a response. It was a masterclass in dignity. A moment where Kennedy didn't just defend himself, but redirected the entire conversation to what mattered most. His words were sharp, but not vicious, pointed, but not petty. He didn't need to raise his voice or sling insults to make his point. This clarity and conviction did all the heavy lifting. The power of the moment lay in its restraint. Where Warren had gone for a personal jab, Kennedy answered with facts, poise, and a subtle wit that hit harder than any shout could. Some senators tried to hide their reactions, their faces betraying a mix of surprise and respect. Others, even those who usually sided with Warren, avoided eye contact, as if realizing she'd miscalculated her target. But Kennedy wasn't finished. He looked around the room, his gaze steady, and added a final thought that drove the point home. "Smart doesn't always sound fancy, ma'am. Where you're from or how you talk doesn't measure your worth. Intelligence is earned, not performed, and character is shown, not staged." Boom! The words landed like a gavel, firm and final. The chamber was silent again. But this time, it was a different kind of quiet, not the stunned hush of Warren's attack, but the reverent pause that follows something profound. In less than a minute, Kennedy had turned a personal slight into a universal statement, not just defending his own honor but speaking for every person who's ever been underestimated because of their accent, their background, or their style. He didn't just clap back. He redefined the conversation, shifting the focus from himself to the broader issue of education and the values that matter. The room felt it. The senators felt it. Even the staffers, usually immune to the drama of Senate hearings, seemed to sit up straighter. This wasn't about one man's ego. It was about leadership, about taking a cheap shot and turning it into a moment of truth. Kennedy's response wasn't just a defense of his credentials, it was a stand for everyone who's ever been judged unfairly, a reminder that real intelligence shines through action, not appearances. As he leaned back in his chair, the faintest hint of a smile on his face, the chamber seemed to exhale collectively, processing what they'd just witnessed. Some senators scribbled notes. Others whispered to their neighbors. But all of them knew they'd seen something extraordinary. This was John Kennedy at his finest. A man who could take a punch and deliver a knockout without ever losing his cool. The internet was about to catch fire. But in that moment, the Senate chamber was the epicenter of a seismic shift, one that would soon ripple far beyond its walls. The moment John Kennedy leaned back in his chair, the faintest trace of a smile on his face, the Senate chamber was still processing the weight of his words. His response to Elizabeth Warren's cutting insult, calling him a relic of the past, hadn't just silenced the room, it had lit a spark that was about to ignite a wildfire across the internet and beyond. In an era where political debates often dissolve into shouting matches or petty soundbites, what Kennedy did was different. It wasn't loud or aggressive, but it was powerful. A rare blend of wit, restraint, and moral clarity that resonated far beyond the marble walls of the Senate. As the hearing continued, with senators scrambling to regain their focus and move on to the next point of discussion, the real story was just beginning to unfold outside the chamber. Within minutes, clips of the exchange were uploaded to social media. and the internet did what it does best. It exploded. The video of Warren's jab and Kennedy's masterful comeback spread like lightning, ricocheting across platforms, from X to YouTube to TikTok, racking up views, likes, and shares faster than anyone could keep up. Hashtags like #Kennedy clapback, #Oxford moment, and #Senate showdown started trending within hours, each one a testament to the moment's raw power. People weren't just sharing the clip, they were dissecting it, celebrating it, turning it into memes and reaction videos that captured the collective awe of what they'd witnessed. "That was the cleanest takedown I've ever seen," one user posted, their words accompanied by a clip of Kennedy's calm, "I didn't go to Oxford just to visit." Another wrote, "Warren threw a punch, but Kennedy dropped a nuke with a smile." The comments poured in, thousands upon thousands, from everyday Americans to political commentators, influencers, to small-town folks who saw something of themselves in Kennedy's stand. "Never judge a Southern accent," one viral post declared, summing up the sentiment that was sweeping the internet. Conservative circles hailed Kennedy as a hero, not just for defending himself, but for embodying a kind of leadership that doesn't need to shout to be heard. "This is how you handle an insult with class," a popular conservative podcast host tweeted, linking to the full video. But the praise wasn't limited to one side of the political spectrum. Even some moderate and liberal commentators, who typically aligned with Warren, admitted she'd crossed a line. She underestimated him, and it backfired spectacularly. One political analyst wrote in a widely shared op-ed, "Kennedy didn't just win the moment, redefined it. The internet couldn't get enough." YouTube channels rushed to upload the footage, some adding dramatic music, slow-motion replays, or captions like, "Watch this before you underestimate John Kennedy," and "Kennedy ends Warren's jab in 60 seconds flat." Reaction videos flooded in, with titles like "Southern Senator Schools Harvard Professor," and "This is how you handle a bully like a boss." Content creators, from political junkies to casual viewers, broke down every second of the exchange: Warren's smirk, Kennedy's pause, the way his voice never wavered. One video, which zoomed in on the stunned faces of other senators in the background, racked up millions of views, with viewers commenting on the sheer discomfort in the room as Kennedy's words hit home. Memes were everywhere. One showed Kennedy's face over a lion's, captioned, "When you mess with the wrong Southerner." Another had Warren's quote next to a picture of a crumbling sandcastle, with Kennedy's response as the tidal wave. In an age where viral moments are often fueled by chaos or outrage, this one stood out for its composure. Kennedy didn't need to raise his voice or sling mud to make his point. His quiet confidence and sharp intellect did all the work. That's what made it so shareable, so unforgettable. It wasn't just a political win. It was a cultural moment, one that spoke to anyone who's ever been underestimated because of how they talk, where they're from, or how they choose to present themselves. The online frenzy wasn't just about entertainment, it was about a deeper truth. Kennedy's response struck a chord because it went beyond the Senate floor, touching on something universal: the idea that real intelligence doesn't need to be flashy, that character shines brighter than condescension. Posts on X captured this sentiment perfectly. "Kennedy just spoke for every small-town kid who's been told they're not smart enough," one user wrote. Their words retweeted thousands of times. Another added, "He didn't just defend himself, he defended all of us who've been judged for our accents or our roots." The moment became a rallying cry for people who felt dismissed or overlooked, whether because of their background, their speech, or their refusal to conform to elite expectations. It wasn't just Southerners who connected with Kennedy's words. People from all walks of life saw their own experiences reflected in his stand. Rural farmers, blue-collar workers, first-generation college students all shared stories in the comments, recounting times they'd been judged unfairly, and how Kennedy's response felt like a victory for them too. Political analysts weighed in, calling it a masterclass in leadership. In a world where politicians try to go viral with stunts, Kennedy did it with substance. one cable news pundit said. He didn't just clap back, he elevated the conversation. The moment was dissected on talk shows, podcasts, and blogs, with hosts marveling at how Kennedy turned a personal attack into a broader statement about values. Even those who disagreed with his politics couldn't deny the power of his delivery. Warren thought she was punching down, one commentator noted. But Kennedy showed her he's playing on a whole different level. The clip became a staple in political highlight reels, a go-to example of how to handle adversity with grace. But the real impact went deeper than likes and shares. Kennedy's words, "Smart doesn't always sound fancy. Intelligence is earned, not performed," became a kind of mantra, quoted in op-eds, printed on t-shirts, and shared in motivational posts. They were a reminder that true leadership isn't about tearing others down. It's about lifting the conversation up. In a political landscape often defined by division and vitriol, Kennedy's response was a beacon of what's possible when you choose dignity over drama. It wasn't about owning Warren or scoring points for one party over another. It was about standing up for principle, for the idea that worth isn't measured by how you sound or where you're from, but by what you do and how you carry yourself. For viewers watching at home, it wasn't just a viral moment, it was a breath of fresh air. In a world where political discourse can feel like a race to the bottom, Kennedy showed that you can fight back without losing your integrity. His response wasn't just a defense of his own character, it was a defense of millions of Americans who've been told they don't belong because they don't fit a certain mold. It was a call to rethink how we judge intelligence and value. A challenge to look beyond appearances and listen to what's being said. The internet kept buzzing, with new reactions and analyses popping up days after the event. But the true legacy of that day was the lesson it left behind. Kennedy didn't just win a debate, he sparked a conversation about what it means to be smart, to be respected, to be heard. He reminded us that class and conviction still have a place in politics, that you don't need to shout to be powerful. If this moment moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment about a time you've been underestimated because of how you speak or where you're from. Let's keep this conversation alive. Because as Kennedy showed us, smart doesn't shout, it speaks with purpose.